So welcome to another wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at Hitler's Reich, World War II in Europe. And this is from GMT Games. And this is designed by Mark McLaughlin and Fred Schachter. That's it. That's who it's designed by. So, this is... So it's a new game, right? This came out
new game.
Very recently. It
Off
is
the P500.
Like, grand strategic level game. So, a very different style of game from the kind of games that we normally play, I'll be honest. I don't know if I've played a game at this scale where there's no units or anything like that.
Yeah, the things that are on the board, these are control markers and fleets. That's it.
And the fleets are basically just help you to gain control of that area, so you would put control of the sea. So there's no army pieces, there's no counters, nothing like that. It's not like Axis and Allies with little tanks and men.
No.
Don't even have that. Even though the board looks quite similar to an Axis and Allies or Risk style, where it's, this large part of a country or an entire country is a whole region. So what you can expect from this game is it's like this back and forth type struggle where you're using card play and dice resolution to kind of control areas. Yeah. And so it represents an entire, from a NATO standpoint, armies like moving across and taking over control of a whole country. And like a whole turn of, us playing a deck of cards
is 1 year.
Is 1 year.
Yeah.
So it's on a scale which is so big that there's not even units on the board.
Right.
And it's just the European theater. And you can see board's actually quite small.
Yeah, it is a small board.
And they do that because there's no pieces on it. The only pieces, like you said, are these little discs, and that represents I took control of that country. Yeah. And you do that through, and I'm going to butcher the name, it's the Card Conquest system, I believe.
Yep.
And it's a really, really cool system. You have basically a deck of cards, and those cards have a value, and you play that, you have a hand of them, and you're playing one, and then you're rolling a bunch of dice, adding that to the value of your card. Mm-hmm. Is my value greater than yours? Yes or no? If
your total value.
Yeah.
The card and the dice.
If I win, I take control of said area.
And you put a marker
I'm able
there
to resolve a thing I was trying to do.
Yeah. And the other thing about the cards are different suits, right? So the highest suit is the Germans.
Yes.
The Germans have, because of that ability, they win all ties. All of their cards will win a tie. Conversely, the Italians are the lowest suit, lose all ties. The Americans and the Russians are considered the middle, and they don't have an advantage. And all the decks are the same. The decks have one card from 2 value through 13.
Yeah, 2 through 13. And then on top of that, you have
a 1.
It's a 1. Yeah,
so it's 1 through 13.
Yeah.
It's a saboteur. And then you have a master spy. Is that what that's called?
Spy ring. Spy ring card. So each player has a spy ring card, which does some special stuff.
Takes away abilities, reroll abilities, that kind of thing.
Because normally the cards like 1 through 10 are just, you play the value. Yeah. That's kind of what it is. The 1 card is a saboteur. It's got a really low value.
A cool card.
But it makes your value on your card also a 1.
Yep. So you might play the 1, but you played a 13. All of a sudden, we're 1 to 1. So we even this, and that was. It's important to learn how to use those cards properly.
And then when you start getting into the higher numbers, like 11, 12, and 13, your really, really big numbers, those also, you get a high number, but they give you a certain number of rerolls on your dice as well.
Yeah.
So you start getting into some really powerful cards that are really, really good. So, you're trying to decide, okay, how much do I really need to take this? I'm going to play my really good card to do it. And then, they can see... The enemy sees, he really needs that. He's going to play one of his best cards. Well, I might just play like a really low number and have him waste that card, and then I'll take it back with my good card.
Right, but remember, you don't get a choice of that. You're supposed to play your cards at the same time. We did have the Master Spy, which you used quite often to determine.
Yes.
Oh, Grant, you play your cards first, and that may be one of the more powerful event cards, because then you can really decide, oh, he wants that really badly. I'm going to use my Master Spy or my
that's-
Saboteur card.
But that to me is the strategy of the game is,
Yes.
without having those kind of abilities, I can see that strategically you need to take this.
So you're going to play
area.
high.
So I know you're going to play
Yeah.
at least a half-decent card.
Right.
And so then I can say, sod it, I don't care, I'm going to just throw it.
A 3.
Or I'm like, I gotta go all in as well. Or I'm throwing in my 1 level card, which is the Saboteur, which then reduces your 13 to a 1 as well.
Evening that field a little bit.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of really cool dynamic in the card play and the events, like you said. There's a ton of different events that you can you get some you can go through and buy or attempt to kind of buy them.
You take an event action.
Which is basically the same as combat resolution. So I'm saying, okay, I need to get out from the deck my strategic bombing card. Ooh. And then we do basically a combat resolution. And if I win, I get my strategic bombing.
Right.
So you got to do that to even get those.
Yeah,
events.
which I liked that part. I thought that was a really neat element. So basically, all of these events, we've kind of cleaned the piles up, but they're kind of spread out, and you can see exactly what events are available.
Yeah, it's not like it's a random deck
No.
or anything.
And I think our first play, I was confused by that. I thought, are these? I have to wait to get the Higgins boats, but then you have to do the action to try and dig it out of the deck. But there are some cards that are Axis and Allied events. They work for both sides. Some that are only Axis, and some that are only Allied. Really like that element of it. I enjoyed the Card Conquest system too. That was fun.
Yeah.
Trying to decide, is Alexander going to play his 12? Because he really needs Kharkov. And I can maybe play an 8 or a 9 and still be competitive. But it comes down to rolling at that point.
And that was the best part about, because I play the Axis, and I'm worried about, I play these crappy Italian cards, I'm going to lose all the time.
Right.
And didn't come up all that often, but the 2 times that it did, I was like, deflated.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Because you lose and you're like, oh.
And you didn't have to worry about that as much,
No.
because you don't have the ones that lose you ties.
No.
Those are just normal. But you have the Allies, the Russians are tied to defending their own mother.
Yeah, and that's an interesting element. When you are attacking from a Russian territory
Or defending it.
or defending, you have to use, if you have in your hand, and how many cards do you get? It's based on your hand size.
So you
started the game, you're like at
6
7.
or 7, yeah.
So if I had 3 Russian cards and they were 2, 4, and 7,
You have to play
I have to play that card when you attack me. Or when so you may say, I'm not going to attack this time with Russia. I'm going to focus on the Western allies trying to control these sea zones or trying to get North Africa. So that was a very neat element, kind of a handicap, I think, that the allies have. And then the game, also based on the years, starts the Axis out. What were you able to do? Pull 4 of your highest valued cards?
Yeah, it's like 4 of your best 6 cards you start
in your
the game
hand.
with. Yeah, so you start with this really powerful hand, and then you have this kind of extra chrome of doing Barbarossa,
Blitzkriegs and
where
Barbarossa,
you just kind of smash into Russia with these really good cards.
Yeah.
And there's some bits and pieces like that, and then you get to the end of 1943, beginning of 1944, and it kind of swings the other way. The Allied player then stacks their deck in the same way. It gets 4 of their 6 best cards, and then they have Operation Overlord and Bagration open to them that they can do whenever they want.
And that felt good. When I got to that point, it started to feel...
You've been under the cosh for 2
I was
years,
like,
3 years.
Finally. And the one really cool thing that I liked about the Operation Overlord, that the card was called like their best, or what was it called? Sorry. I should have remembered the name. But it gave me the ability, their finest hour. It gave me the ability when I do the Normandy invasion to actually play 2 cards. I chose a card to play, and then off the top of my deck, I randomly drew a card.
Yes.
And you remember the one game, I think our second game?
I played the Sabotage on you.
Right, so it lowered my high value. I think I played like a 13.
Yeah.
And then the card I drew off the top of my deck was like a 2. And that second game, I totally botched my Operation Overlord.
Yeah, it was.
And I actually conceded after that because it was 1944.
It was never.
And I was
happen.
like, I'm not going to win. That was cool though. I did like that element. So I did enjoy that back and forth. You started out really powerful. I got more powerful at the end. I had more events. I started to get 3 events that I could keep, and you only started to get 2. So it allowed me, now you can only ever have 6 in your tableau, but I was getting more options to pick the better ones. And I thought that was cool that it really, and then my hand size grew every turn.
Well, and mine was shrinking because of strategic bombing, things like that. And that's really neat. And what I liked with the events, though, is you have to resolve the combat to get them. Yeah. So you have to am I wasting my good cards on getting events when I should be using them to defend Rome?
But the reality is those events, without those good events, you're not going to win.
Yes.
So I think this game is very tied to making sure you get events, getting the right events. There's a couple different strategies too. The game can be lost if one side has a hand size of 12 and the other guy has 4. 3 or less.
3 or less, yeah.
So as the Allies, if I kept going in there and building my hand size with the war production and the convoys, and then started doing strategic bombing on you, reducing your hand size, and taking Rome and Paris, all of a sudden you're within striking range of an auto loss.
And I'm doing the same thing early on.
With
I got
wolf
packs, things like that, trying to
You're trying to get these the North Sea and the Irish Sea. You also a couple of times took Iraq.
Yeah.
And
trying to get down to
the
Suez as well.
If you lose those 4 cards, man, that's bad. All of a sudden the Allies are down to 3 or 4 cards. So I like that element too. There's a different way to win. And that may be something I need to try more in a future play. I don't know that I did a lot of that. I did a little. I could have focused more on that and maybe
hard
put
to do that.
It is.
I'll say that. It's hard to really get that to go. Now, if it starts kind of swinging and you're like, oh,
I can do that.
Okay, let's go.
I'm going to pounce on it. Overall, I enjoyed the experience. I'm still a little struggling. I don't even know what to call it, but we've played this game a couple of times. I also played solo the other night and got my absolute head handed to me. At the end of 1941, the Russians literally were won. They were at Kharkov, which we talked about. That's actually historical.
Yes.
But they were almost on top of me, and I don't know that I could stop them. It was getting to the point where I was like, oh, I was really going to struggle. That bot was amazing, by the way. The solo game's interesting.
Is it playable? Is it easy to learn?
It is playable. It took me a while to learn it.
Okay.
The flow chart's fairly simple. You just need to read it and understand it. Some of them are worded. I think it could be worded a little more clearly. But I would there's 2 different types of solo as well. There's a Fog of War, which is very random. Basically, you're just pulling a card off the top each time. The other one, though, they have a choice of how the Axis will choose their cards. It's based on rolling, but it's a little more refined. Random. So yeah, I think it definitely has a solo system that is playable. Vez Arponen designed it, and it works. It's very smart, very slick.
So what we'll do, I think, is we'll show you kind of the board a little bit, just a few of the mechanics of how it works, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So here's a kind of a quick setup of what a game might, well, not really look like, but the board itself covers the whole of the Eastern European theatre, I should say. And you look, it's just divided up into regions. So this is Turkey, this is kind of a Vichy, Syria, Lebanon. All of these are kind of large areas. You've got Milan here, then you've got Rome, Naples. So Italy is really in 3 major sections with Sicily over here. And it's generally in regions. And what you'll see dotted across the map are these discs, I guess you call them, discs. And the discs represent control. If you look on the map, printed on here are the kind of inherent control at the start of 1941. Game starts in 1941, you play all the way through to the end of 1945. When control changes hands, so if the Allies invade Libya, you simply put out an Allied control marker. Up here you'll see in Minsk, the Axis player took control of Minsk, put out a black one. The Russian player, which is controlled by the Allies are Western Allies and Russia together. Axis player is Germans and Italians. The Russians took control of Romania. All right, so that's really all the pieces out. The other things that you'll find are these little discs, these little kind of hexagonal cylinders with the stars on them. You recognize these from coin games and the like. These represent fortresses. In a normal area, they are just placed face down with the star face down. if they're in an area with a supply source, these little oil barrels, you put it with the star face up, and that indicates that you get an extra defensive dice when you're defending only. And if you've got the star, I believe it might be 2 extra dice, or you can re-roll one of them or something. Oh, no, I apologize. So, if you have a fortress, if you roll your defensive dice, you can change one of the dice to a 4. If you have the star, because you're in a kind of a production area, you can change it to a 5. That's how that works. But yeah, it's a really good roll. So that's one of the things you do, is just place those out. The other thing is these long sticks of fleets. I put a fleet here. Great. The enemy might put a fleet here as well. And what happens is a fleet doesn't give you control of the sea zone. The fleet is a modifier to taking control. So normally, anytime you invade a land area, or if you're trying to take control of a sea area, or if you're trying to gain control of an event, that's also kind of an event action, you play a card from your conflict card hand. Say, I'm going to play... So the Germans play one, and the Allies play one, and you play them face down, and then you reveal them. So the Germans played a 6, Allies played a 10. What you would do... So we're trying to take control of this sea area, say. Normally, you roll 3 dice apiece. That's it. Now, we're trying to take control of this area. So what happens is I've got a fleet, Axis gains +1 dice. And then the other option would be, if the Allies, or if one side controls... I'm going to get this right. If all the land areas adjacent to the sea zone are controlled by a single faction, they would get an extra dice. In this instance, that's not the case, because these two are kind of neutral factions, so to speak. So they don't have them. And basically what you do is you just roll the dice, and then you add your values to the card. So the Allies have 10, 15, 16, 17, 18. And whilst the Axis started with lower card, they've now got 18, 19, 20, 21. And so they're going to win this, and quite simply we just remove the fleet, because they were destroyed in the combat, and they're going to add control. We've got a nice big bag of control markers, and now we control that sea zone. Great. Why would I want to do that? Well, if there was ever a point, and this is a terrible example, basically, if I'm invading an area, like a land area, you get a bonus to attack if you control more adjacent areas. So up here, for example, we'll remove this. If the Russians were trying to invade Romania, there would be no bonuses, because they don't control a bunch of land and sea areas next to them. If Hungary was trying to invade Bessarabia, however, the Axis controls 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 5 adjacent areas. So they're going to gain an extra dice. And if you're invading Crimea, and you control the Black Sea, for example, well, you have 1, 2, and the Russians have 1, 2. So it's a wash, so you wouldn't kind of get that. But that's why controlling the sea areas can be very, very important. If you look down here, you're thinking about, okay, we're going to invade Sicily. Well, to do that, you have to control the sea. So some sea control is very, very important. Up in the North Sea and the Irish Sea, there's also production markers as well, so you actually get resources for controlling those areas too. But that's really a lot of how it is. And what you'll find is the game goes back and forth. Okay, Germans invade Bessarabia. Germans invade Crimea. And then it's, I try to take it back, which would just remove it. I'm going to re-invade it, try and take it back. And then, you know, the Germans have a couple of these yellow blitzkrieg cubes. Very expensive and costly to use them, but I might be able to kind of double. I get a second attack. Oh, I can take Kharkov. Great. And it's all done through this dice rolling and card playing. And so what you get is, you have these hands of cards, and some of them have like a 13 value on them. This is the highest possible value. But you get 3 dice symbols, which means you can re-roll 3 dice if they suck. That was even worse. And so you get this really, really cool bluffing game where I've got a hand of total garbage. I've got these Italian cards with really low values. If you look at the Italian cards, they lose ties on all of them, so it's just awful. But I've, if that's all you've got in your hand, that's what you're going to play. And so you end up looking at, I've got a 10, and I'm going against my 2, and I'm going to lose a tie, even if I can get my dice rolling up that high. So when I roll my bones, I rolled really well. I got a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, make it a 13. If the allied player rolls a 13, even though I rolled as well as I could, and they rolled as badly as they could, they're still going to win. And that's really a lot of what this game is. There's not a lot extra to it. There's some chrome about launching Barbarossa, where you can attack all of these. Overlord, where you get some bonuses attacking and kind of invading Normandy and all that stuff. Bagration, when you invade the Eastern Bloc. But really, it's a hand management game. You're trying to grow your hand size and shrink the enemies, because there's some victory conditions there if you can get that to go. But the more cards you have, the more options you have, the more things that you can do. The smaller your hand size is, you have very limited options. And that's really the system. And the system is so awesome. It's really, really fun to do that. And you do it over and over and over again. And you go through a whole year, go to the next year, you do it all over again. And you just progress through the wall. And like I say, you do about 4 or 5 years worth, and then it's kind of over. Now, outside of the map, what makes this a really cool, kind of interesting game are these event cards. These are the allied events. There's a ton of them. And some of them come through in certain dates, so this is 1942 plus. You can't get this in 1941, for example. Some of them you start off with, or you potentially could start off with. But a lot of these do really cool things. So you got General Zhukov. When defending a Soviet Allied controlled land area in land conflict, add 1 die. He's just great defensive die if you're defending in a Soviet area. And, it's simple things like that whilst on a huge scale like this, they make a difference and that give the game some of that World War II flavor over the course of the game. And I had a fun time doing that as well. Is these things, you get a couple of them at random, but then you can go through and say, I would like to attempt to acquire Swedish trade. Boom. And this is a really cool ability, increases my Axis hand size. Well, for me to acquire this, we have to resolve combat like we did. So then you start saying, how badly do I want this that I'm going to waste a really good card? I'm going to, say I was going to play this. Is it worth me spending my really good card to acquire this versus just using this to then, do an invasion on Smolensk, for example, or trying to take Leningrad, or if I can get up to get in Stalingrad and take the oil fields of the Caucasus. So that's really a lot of what this game is managing that hand, weighing up pros and cons of is this worth it. At the same time, though, you're just playing a card and chucking dice. So there is a lightness to it. Sometimes you just play cards and you get totally hosed and you just have to say, it's totally fine, it's okay. So that's kind of a look at the board. What we'll do is we'll kind of wrap up with some final thoughts. So that was a look at the board and kind of the mechanics of what's going on, so to speak, and how you can at least approach the game. Rules-wise, this game is not complex.
No.
The problem is that you wouldn't know that from reading the rulebook. And if you've heard or read anything about the game, a lot of people have got complaints about the rulebook, and I tend to agree with that. I felt like the rulebook was it was more complicated than it needed to be. This game is really not complex.
Fairly simple mechanically.
And that's what makes that's the best part of the game.
Yeah.
Is how simple and streamlined the game is. But there were parts of the rules that weren't in the rule book, or it was organized in a really weird way, or worded very poorly.
Yeah.
That made the rule book made it seem way more complex than it was. And that was something that I'm like, hopefully in a later edition they kind of refine that, make that a bit more accessible.
Well, and I thought in your written review you did an excellent job of, you said this is an interesting system, even an excellent system,
yes,
that deserves an editor.
Yes.
And I think that comment is spot on, because even after 2 full plays, part of a third that we messed around with, and a halfway solo play, there's times I read that rule book and I'm like, you're kidding. I have no idea what that's saying to me. And that's the frustrating part in this game. You talked to someone at WBC about this game, right? Share that. I thought that was a great experience.
Yeah, and it actually opened my eyes, because the first time we played this, I pretty much wrote it off. Because I was like, this game what is it trying to be? The rulebook was really hard for me to get a hold of.
Well, and it had critical errors that absolutely made it unplayable.
There was the rules missing from the rulebook.
You could,
right?
Yeah, the rule to draw a card after a conflict, totally absent.
It's in the playbook, but
it's in the playbook as you go through the example, and that's how we found it.
Yeah.
But it is, because I lost the game the first time on Barbarossa.
You just don't have any cards.
You attacked me 5 times, and I discarded my entire hand and lost.
Yeah, but it was just, and then, because then it's like, was that hand limit? Is that hand, very...
Yeah.
So,
but anyway, back to your story, sorry.
But yeah, that was, so I was kind of down and out in this game, which was a shame, because I had a lot of hype and I was excited for it. We got it to go, and I was like, yeah, okay, it was interesting. It was interesting, yeah. The system's cool, but I wanted it to be more than it was. And the guy I spoke to at WBC, he kind of saved the game for me in a way, because he was like, yeah, people think that this is like a war game, but really, it's not. It's like an abstract, old school, like an ancient strategy game that has a war theme in it.
Right. And I think that's the key word, war theme.
Yes. Like this, it looks like they say it's World War II in 2 hours. And sure, it does that, and it has that theme, and a lot of that is through the cards and the map itself.
Well, the historic chrome is here with the operations, the different events, Enigma.
The events are really cool.
Yeah, they are cool.
But the gameplay itself, like you saw, it's a lot of back and forth. I take this area, now that gives me advantage in this area, I take that area. Oh, I lost that roll. Okay, you're going to take it back now. And then it's this lot of back and forth struggle, which when I first played it, I was like, what are we doing? It just seemed
to never go anywhere that first time. And I think we were thinking about it in the totally opposite way that it should be thought about.
Yes.
Even the point, remember I think it was after our second play, we finally started to understand what you should do in North Africa. Which is hilarious.
That was my fault. I had ignored history, because I totally botched Barbarossa. It was awful.
I think you won
totally
one area.
Screwed it up.
Maybe 2.
And then I committed a whole bunch of stuff to try to rectify that. And then I was so hosed.
Yeah.
And you were doing a bunch of stuff, getting all these
sea zones and fleets.
And I was like, what should I be doing? Because I'm just hitting my head on the wall in the east, which is what they were doing.
Yeah, it's what happened.
And then I just looked at the bottom of the map and I was like,
oh,
I'm an idiot, a huge idiot.
Yeah, because there's 2 supply areas down there.
Charging out of Libya, because I've got at least even odds.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
it's 1-on-1. Basically, you're going to roll 3 dice to 3 dice, and it's your card play.
Whereas I was trying to take Kharkov, and I'm like at a horrible disadvantage trying to do that. But I was like, I should be plowing through this. But you saw it at the same time, but then it all went terribly wrong.
Yeah.
But that's something to really kind of take from this game, is that it's a World War II game, but this is a World War II themed abstract game almost. It's taking control of areas. How can I gain advantages to get more of the map? And it's less. I don't know. I don't know how to describe that. It was less kind of tactical in that way, where I was expecting this thing didn't happen this way, or I'm putting out discs on a map.
Yeah, it's an abstract strategy.
Yes,
with a war theme, and I think the war theme, just like you said, the historical narrative should be a guide for how the game should be prosecuted.
Yes.
You don't necessarily have to do Barbarossa in the first turn. I think
you want to do it in 1941.
You want to do it within that first year, but maybe you should focus a little bit down on North Africa.
Yeah.
And maybe as the Allies, you should start building up your protection in the North Sea and around Britain. So that's a historic guide. You can do whatever you want, right? But I think that historic guide will help play the game and have it make a little bit more sense. And don't be so tied into the tactical side of it. Sometimes it just comes down to a roll.
A lot of it does.
And that's fine.
That's how the game is 2 hours.
Right.
And really it's 3.
Yeah.
But
I agree. I think for us it's 3 to 3.5. And I think for anybody it's going to be 3.
Yeah. It's a fascinating system. I really enjoy the system. The card play and the dice rolling, it keeps it quite light from a wargaming standpoint. And so I actually really want to see more games from this system. I'd like to see them edited a little bit better and maybe just...
I think the rules just need to be deepened, broadened, and clarified.
Just clarified.
They need to have a better understanding. I don't know. And maybe we're dense. I don't know. But I think overall we enjoyed our plays of this. I think the system is intriguing and interesting. The card play is interesting. There's just some problems that need to be fixed in order to make this game, to the average player, very good.
Yeah, I've spoken with people who are like, I can't play this game because I read the rules. And I'm like, I totally understand that. Yep. But I'm like, if it had a second edition rulebook where they just clarified that, this game could become a mainstay for a lot of people.
I think this is definitely an intro level type game for people that are interested in historic simulations.
If I've played Axis and Allies with someone,
this is something you'd like.
The next step.
I think so,
because it's a little bit more abstract, but it's a bit more. It's more historical than Axis and Allies. You got to do some crazy stuff.
Yeah, you can. You can. But I think overall, it's a good game. I will go as far as saying that. But it's a flawed game. And what I mean by that is in the rules.
Yes.
They need to be clarified. And I'm going to use the word broaden because there's a lot of times it's very hard to understand what those rules are saying.
And I also think a part of that was how foreign the mechanics are.
Yes, it's different than expected.
I'm used to reading a lot of hex and counter wargame rule books or a lot of point-to-point rule books, even area movement, impulse rule books. And this was just... because it's this whole card system with the dice rolling and things like that, it was a lot of the words were just different from ones I'm used to seeing in a rulebook. Yeah. And so there was that kind of a foreign nature to it. And then on top of the rulebook was not very clear. It was very, very hard to read what is essentially should not be a difficult rulebook.
Yeah.
Because gameplay-wise, I could teach this to someone without the rules, and we could sit down and play it. It is not a complex game.
And to be honest, the player aids are pretty good.
Yes, they are.
There are some things that I think need to be clarified. One problem we also noticed is on these tracks, they need to say when Operation Bagration is available. Yeah. And when because I'm telling you, you're so focused on things, you're forgetting, oh my gosh, I can now do Operation Overlord.
You get halfway through 1944 and you're like, oh crap, I should have stacked my hand.
So I think that was our second play or first play. We totally missed that. And I'm like, dude, when do I get to do, it's 19, and we're like, duh. So we tried to go back and reassemble that because you stack your deck. And it's like, okay, now I see how I can do this because I tried and it just didn't work. But I think there needs to be a mnemonic device here on this board, very similar to this. There's this device up in the upper left. It refers to rule sections, remember?
Yeah, but
that's not
5.5.1.
That's not good enough.
Yeah.
Put on there, Operation Bagration, available to the Allies.
Yep.
Operation Overlord, available to the Allies. Very simple correction, I think, for that problem.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
But and that was one thing where I'm like, oh man, we're so dumb.
Yeah,
we missed that.
I was embarrassed.
But we missed it because we were so into the game.
We were. The system, right? How am I going to beat Alexander? Yeah.
And that's
a good sign, I think.
Yes. But of the system, the card play
is so interesting.
I'm like pulling teeth trying to make sure I've got some cards, and getting it to work was so much fun. Yeah. I really, really, really like the system. I want to play more games in the system.
I wonder if they're going to do more games. I would think
if they don't, it would be a disservice.
I think they need to do
really good.
There's a lot of conflicts that I think can be managed with this card system.
It just needs someone to just like
need some fine-tuning.
sand off the edges and kind of get it refined. Yeah. But yeah, this was it was a fun game. I think once we like really got down to it,
right?
But it should have been more accessible than it was. That's what I'll say with that. That's Hitler's Reich from GMT Games. It's available now. It's a nice little small 2-inch box. It's World War II in a bit.
Which I like. It sits on my shelf in a very specific spot because it takes up less space, right?
Yeah.
It could have been a 3-inch box, but I'm glad they did a smaller 2-inch.
It's not some monster game.
The other thing I would say, we have already done a written review on this that's been on the blog, which is typically not the way we do this.
Oh.
And I did a couple of action points. So if you're interested in some of those elements, go to the blog. You can read those. You did an excellent job on the review. I tried to help people understand some of the conflict resolution mechanics for attacks, for getting events, and I think that will help people understand how to do it. You're still going to have to read the rule book. You're still going to have to look at errata and try to figure that out. But definitely check that stuff out on theplayersaid.com. I'm plugging our own stuff.
As you should.
Yeah.
I'm also going to plug BGG because the page
Lots
for this
of-
has a lot of the fixes and really what you should try and do.
Yeah.
Hey, remember this thing and remember this rule.
Don't forget this like Alexander Grant did.
There's some good stuff on there that are going to help you actually play this instead of just playing it straight out of the box.
The other good thing about this game is this is not a $75 game.
No. How much is it?
I think on the P500 it was like 40.
Which is a great
So
price,
it may
by the
now
way.
be 50, but you're paying for the solid box and the bunch of wood. There's an entire bag of markers. This is an affordable game, I think.
Yes.
That has some replayability and some interest to it. So if you want to jump in on something, I think this is a good start to that.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
No, and there's good support out there. You'll need it. You got to go out and find that support.
Yeah.
So appreciate you guys tuning in. This has been Hitler's Reich, World War II in Europe from GMT Games, and I've been Alexander from the Players Aid.
And I'm Grant. Thank you.